The Contracts 2.0 project is a really interesting project because it shows the diversity of agri-environmental commitments we can have in Europe, the forms of contracts, the forms of cooperation of farmers, which indeed has to be expanded in the future, and for which we hope that the future policy of the Common Agricultural Policy and the current CAP plans will contribute. But it shows how much work is still to be done to get to better contracts and to better commitments to serve the environmental and climate objectives we have in Europe, and to really implement at a bigger scale practices which are in favor of the environment and of the climate, and to show farmers and other beneficiaries, other land managers in particular, that it is worthwhile to contribute and to participate in these. And it is also a call to policymakers in the national ministries and in the national authorities to be more courageous, to use the opportunities policy framework gives you to make innovative approaches happen.
So we chose a participatory co-design process to discuss different approaches in real-life contexts, and where possible even test them. To do that, we established what we called contract and policy innovation labs in 13 different regions in 9 countries, where we assessed existing and novel contracts and started developing them into viable agri-environmental schemes together with farmers and other stakeholders, for example, stakeholders from local administrations, from NGOs, or also from landscape associations. In addition to that, we had scientific work packages to examine the various contractual solutions regarding their ecological and socio-economic dimensions.
The most interesting was to see that in several countries we had similar experiences, like farmers are really conscious about the environmental problems, and they are willing to take some responsibility in this, but they see that the current contracts, they don't allow them because of they are too rigid. For example, they don't have the freedom to adapt certain measures, and they want more flexibility to increase the results, and it would give them more possibilities also to cooperate together. So that we see that there are a lot of interest for these kind of collective approaches, result-based approaches.
It turns out that farmers can actually appreciate results-based contracts in which they're being paid for results and they could do whatever they want to reach these results, rather than being paid for practices, somebody telling them what to do. And in particular, we found this about contracts for conservation of biodiversity. It turns out that once we explain to the farmers what biodiversity is and how can this be improved on different levels, how it can be measured, it turns out they understand it quite well, and they have good ideas about how to improve biodiversity at their farms. And they think they could do better than if we just give them a set of practices to implement.
The main results of the project, or the most important ones, I would say, it's that we have to think about not only in one direction, you have to combine different aspects. And I give you an example. I'm really an advocate for result-based schemes, actually. But I would say in combination with these collective approaches, I would say that's definitely a pathway we should go for. Yeah? So another example is that we have this agri-environmental policy on the one hand, and then we have a call for private initiatives and that the business sector should take over more responsibility. But I would say we could also, or should also, really combine these very different type of approaches, how to improve the environmental situation. For instance, to combine agri-environmental policy, this direct payments, with value chain approaches. And you have different experts for these different subjects. And that's, I would say, it's a kind of hindering factors why you don't really see the big picture.
biggest impact of Contracts 2.0, specifically for the English context, I think, is that we managed to build such good relationships with people in government that are involved in designing the next round of environmental land management schemes. So that is replacing the agri-environment schemes in England post-Brexit. And the fact that we managed to show them how results-based approaches can work, because we took them to Ireland, we shoved them in the field with the farmers together, and they started talking, they started understanding how exactly that can work. And this was the best result that we could hope for, the best outcome, because with that, now it's sort of out of our hands. It needs to be taken forward. You know, the message spread, the advantages being communicated within government, the policy teams, the ones actually making the decisions and saying, this is how we're going to integrate results-based in ELMS. And I think this is as much as we could do, possibly. And so for me, that was the biggest impact that Contracts 2.0 has in England.
From farming perspective, I would say it was quite well to learn how good different actors and different people can work together on a common target, the contracts. And this is more or less, for me personally, the main finding, I would say.
The impact we hope is that a different looking of how to design contracts. At least in some countries, we hope that there is also design contracts is not a pure technocratic problem that should be solved in the capitals, where you have only the best knowledge from administrators and researchers, but where you have to get also expertise from others, like farmers, practitioners. And I think this is hopefully a bit of mentality change that we started and hope that will lead to better contracts, which are much more attractive for farmers, more effective, and also more interesting to farmers, and at the end result in more environmental services for society.